Yo, what is good, everyone? Zikrik here. It is July 28th. I just finished watching the entire campfire chat with the Diablo 4 devs, and a huge portion of that was focused on Sorcerer changes. So this video is going to be taking a close look at all of the Sorcerer changes mentioned through the eyes of a fellow Sorcerer. One thing to note that these are not final changes. They mentioned that the final patch notes will be released August 2nd, with the actual release of 1.1.1, which is the patch these changes are coming on, happening on August 8th. And so this is basically drawn exactly from what was shown in the slides, and I'm looking at my other monitor over here for the notes. And then I will include text on the screen that shows exactly what they showed in the slides for each change. The other thing I did is that I don't think they realize our magic brains categorize stuff within the different elements. And so I took everything and rearranged it to where we'll be covering the general stuff first up front, and then we can take a look at everything that affected lightning, everything that affected fire, and then everything that affected frost all together. And you'll find timestamps to that in the description, where if you want to navigate to a specific element based on your build and see just those changes, you will be able to do that. And I will take all the text from the slide that I typed out and put it in the pinned comment. So if you want the actual cliff notes of the text of all the changes, you can reference the pinned comment. Okay, let's get started. So some very general changes that affect everyone that aren't specific to Sorcerer but will affect us are monster density increasing, boosting the health of bosses as well as rewards, resource drain, cold enchanted, and backstabber affixes removed as nightmare dungeon affixes. So will be quite helpful for our class. Backstabber and resource drain, I know, are especially annoying for me. The minor stash changes they've been talking about, supposed improvements to the memory leak to help with the crashes, but I won't really believe that until I see it. And then they also mentioned that they are still working on the resistance mechanics and want to bring it up to the level of other defensive choices, but it sounds like there's nothing really substantial that's going to be released in 1.1.1 for that. And then the final thing, right when they started talking about Sorcerer, they mentioned something, I didn't catch the exact terminology they used, but basically this idea of trade-offs where if they remove power from one thing, they want to add it back somewhere else. Unlike, what we kind of saw with last patch where they had a massive nerf, especially to the immobilized plus burn conditions for Devouring Blaze, where we essentially saw a 90% decrease in crit damage. If you were running it on your necklace and had 6 ranks, it went from 150% to 60%. And so, from my perspective, if we see that kind of a decrease somewhere, we would like to see those stats, that 90% added in other places, specifically, in my personal opinion, needs to be added in some of these other passive categories within our skill tree, because these DB ranks were removed from our skill tree. And so I really believe that these other passives, so elemental dominance, conjuration mastery, hoarfrost, icy touch, I think these need to receive some of that 90% reduction. And it looks like instead most of these changes are focused on buffing aspects, like legendary aspects, things like that. And so that bums me out a little bit. The changes are good in general, I think, and we're moving in the right direction. But I really feel like for us to be able to stack up against other classes, when they remove a vast amount of our power like that, they need to make up for it in other places. And the other thing that really bothers me about the passives in the skill tree is glass cannon's kind of broken, where this all damage, it shows a multiplier, but it's actually in the conditional modifier group with all your other conditional modifiers, but the damage you take is multiplicative. And so that's kind of that kind of just sucks in general. And then also, you look at some of these passives with multipliers, there's not a lightning passive with a multiplier. And so I really think one of these lightning passives needs to give you a similar type of equation multiplier, the way that Hoarfrost does, the way that Icy Touch does, the way that Devouring Blaze does. Lightning really needs some love, and you can see that reflected in some of these changes that they are making, but I don't think it's going to be quite enough, but it is a step in the right direction. And so we will be going over all that stuff. So last couple things from a general perspective are the changes to unique items that affect us. So mainly the gloves of the Illuminator, and basically what they're doing on this is they're changing the damage reduction, which you can see right now, the window is 65 to 55%. They're changing it to 45 to 35%. And so basically what this is going to do is it's going to make the Mario, the Super Mario Sorcerer build a lot more viable, where right now these gloves, if you put them on like mine, even if they're at the low end of the roll, your fireball explosion damage is basically going to be halved. And so you're going to see half the damage with each explosion. And the trade-off is it bounces 3 times. So instead of getting a single explosion, you're getting 3 explosions that kind of travel in a line. And they also change the offset per bounce from 3 to 2.5. So they'll bounce a little closer together. So it will be more reasonable to try to hit a single enemy with more than one explosion. But in general, this is still going to be very much a group cleave focused spell if you use the gloves stacked with the Staff of Endless Rage. And so this is just what I call the Super Mario build, because basically you're just, throwing your bouncing fireballs. But I will be doing a full build guide on this build after these changes at some point, just because of, how cool it is. So basically what you can do this is you can see you can bounce. If you use it with the Staff of Endless Rage, which gives you a third cast of Fireball, you can basically bounce 1, and then 3 fireballs. Every third cast you're going to be bouncing an extra fireball. And the problem with this right now, you can see, is my damage is pretty low compared to if I just shot a normal fireball. It's literally halved with each explosion. And the bounces are kind of far apart, right? So the bounces are going to get closer together, as well as the damage being a little bit better. So I do think this kind of unique build with fireball being like a big group cleave is going to get a lot better with the changes. Oh, the other change on gloves is the illuminators. They're changing this lucky hit from this stun chance to chance to restore primary resource, kind of like Frostburn. See how Frostburn has the lucky hit, restore primary resource. So it's basically going to mirror that, I think. So those are the changes of gloves, the illuminator, and then temerity, which are those defensive pants. Which I think now with these changes could actually be quite useful for us if we're trying to stay alive in later tier nightmare dungeons. Is all stats affixed replaced with max life. Barrier now scales off of max life, which is really big for us if you're in a barrier based build and you're running your Icefall legendary node here. So our Deep Freeze barrier and our ice armor actually scales off our base health, but this Icefall legendary node scales off of our max health. And so if you're building into max health with gems and such, you can get this barrier quite big, and it will also scale the barrier on temerity now. And if you're in a barrier focused build, that's just an extra barrier to add to your stack. So definitely another item worth considering. And then last general change is with the hearts. So they changed this Caged Heart of Spellbreaking. See how right now it says, after taking elemental damage, gain 40 to 60% resistance to that element for 9 seconds. And so they basically changed this from elemental resistance to straight damage reduction. So it will now be gain 10 to 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. And while I think this is a good change, and it might actually, make this heart useful and usable for us, it basically confirms, without them saying it, that the resistances currently do nothing, because they're basically considering trading 40 to 60% resistances, which the hearts have on them now, for 10 to 20% damage reduction. And that's apparently a big buff. And so take that for what it's worth. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about Sorcerer specific are changes to some of our glyphs. And these changes are made to supposedly help us with our survivability and help us, be able to live longer in later tier nightmare dungeons and stuff, help with our insane squishiness. And I don't think it's going to help that much. And here's why. These glyphs that they made changes to, which are just the reinforced rare glyph, the territorial rare glyph, and the warding rare glyph, they're very specific use cases. 2 of them just increase rare nodes. They don't scale off of the stats around them, and so they're inherently at a disadvantage because of that. And my main problem with them is, in order to run them, we are going to have to drop an offensive glyph. And we are already at a power disadvantage, I think, when compared to other classes, especially since the Devouring Blaze nerfs, and them not sort of adding that power back in other places in the skill tree. And so in order to take advantage of these defensive buffs, you're going to have to drop an offensive glyph. And a lot of our offensive glyphs have these additional bonuses that multiply our damage equation, right? And so the later we get into endgame, the bigger the different numbers are in our damage equation, the more valuable these additional bonuses become, right? So it's going to cost you quite a bit to have to drop something like exploit, like destruction, really a lot of these flame feeder, tactician, control, not frostbite, but a lot of them give, very well scaling additional bonuses on top of the fact that they scale based on the nodes around them. And so you can achieve quite a bit of scaling out of these glyphs versus, some of these ones that they have buffed. Let's take warding, for example, gain 25% bonus to all rare nodes within range. Well, all that's going to do is buff, if I put it here on my Frigid Fate board, it's just going to buff my weakness and my chilling by, at max rank at 21 by 125%. And so at level 21, what that's actually going to give me is an extra 12.5% vulnerable damage, an extra 12.5 intelligence, an extra like 15% cold resistance, and another extra intelligence. So just, you compare that to what, fully scaling something like exploit or destruction by grabbing all these, mine's not optimized yet because I'm not at the level where these have their second range. But, if you're at 21 and you have your exploit or destruction in some of the boards with 39 decks, you can achieve, destruction giving you 70% crit damage fully scaled, exploit giving you 28% vul damage fully scaled, enchanter giving you 91% non-physical damage fully scaled. And they're basically, by buffing these defensive glyphs, they're like, hey, you should take one of those out and run one of these shitty scaling ones just for the damage reduction. And they didn't really increase the damage reduction that much. And so let's take a look at the 3 glyphs that they actually changed, with the first one being reinforced here. So same thing with 25% bonus to rare nodes within range. So, not a huge impact, especially when you consider, what rare nodes are often within range of our sockets. It's usually 1 damage node with 1 resistance node. And they confirm by some of the other changes mentioned here that resistances are basically useless right now. And so, these glyphs that do this rare node boost probably aren't going to be super valuable, the actual stat buff they give you, until they fix resistances. And then, there might be a case where they're worth using because that buff to the resistance node within range is also helpful. But right now, we're just getting this little buff to the offensive node within range and a little buff to int, and the resistances are still doing nothing for us. So for reinforced, you gain 10% damage reduction while you have a barrier. They're increasing this from 10 to 15%. And so they're giving you 5% more damage reduction when you have a barrier. It's like, okay, you have a barrier though. And so, you're going to be fine if you get hit because you have a barrier usually, right? And this is only for barrier specific builds. So this isn't even overall damage reduction. It's only damage reduction when you have a barrier, and only 5% more. Territorial is the one that actually does scale with stats within range, and it scales off of decks. You can see here, for every 5 decks purchased within range, you deal 2% increased damage to close targets. The problem with this one is we're sorcerers and we're squishy as fuck, right? And so we're generally not close or not wanting to be close. There's some builds where, specifically like an arc lash, like lightning melee build, where being close is good, but the majority of builds, being close is bad, right? We're trying to keep distance and do damage to where we don't get hit. And so this, while this buff, again, buffed 5% from 10 to 15%, and it only is against close enemies, right? So it's going to be a very specific use case for this one being useful. I will say this will stack nicely with the new Mage Lords aspect they added for the lightning build, and so we'll cover that in a minute in the lightning section. And then the last one, warding, had its damage reduction increased from 13 to 25%, but this damage reduction only comes in effect when you're low mana, right? So if you're at full mana, it's essentially going to be at 0, and I would assume the closer you get to 0 mana, the closer you'll get to that 25%. And again, doesn't scale with the nodes around it, just the 25% bonus, so we're not getting much value out of the actual placement of the glyph and the stats around it, and the damage reduction is only going to come in effect when you're low mana, right? And so those are the glyph changes. While I do think they might be a step in the right direction, I don't think they are appropriate changes to appropriate glyphs. They're basically slight buffs to glyphs no one's really running except for very specific use cases. And so, this is a work in progress for sure. All right, now let's dive into the elemental changes made for Sorcerer, starting with all the changes made to our Lightning School. And so I think these changes are cool. I think they're moving in the right direction, but I'm not sure they are strong enough to give us exactly what we need for a lightning build to be super viable, but they are good changes, I think, in general. And so let's take a look at the skill passive changes first. So they're basically upgrading the chain lightning upgrades. So if we come up here to chain lightning, so greater chain lightning is getting changed from what's shown on the screen here to each time chain lightning bounces, its next hit deals 5% increased damage. And so instead of having to bounce off you, it's just going to deal 5% increased damage per bounce. And then destructive chain lightning is getting just buffed 5%. And so your chance to form crackling energy will be 30% instead of 25%. My biggest problem with chain lightning is it's first of all, the visual effects could be a lot cooler. You know, I think of like Thrall fucking casting a chain lightning in World of Warcraft, and it's just so much cooler than our little zap we got here. And so I think they could the visuals and effect could use a lot of love, maybe with a nice like thunderclap or something. But on top of that, you know, even with the next one of the next aspect buffs specifically to chain lightning that links with this is the aspect of unbroken tether. And so this is going to increase the bonus chain lightning bounces from 2 to 4. So the total possible bounces for chain lightning are going to increase from 7 to 9. But when you consider that compared to some of these other core spells, it's a very low amount of enemies hit. And so with this increase to mob density, chain lightning is going to struggle even more because you will, with running the aspect, you will be able to hit a total of 9 mobs, whereas something like frozen orb, you know, ice shards with the aspect, incinerate can hit many more enemies than that, it seems like. And so I really feel like chain lightning needs some additional cleave effect. My opinion, it should bounce to all enemies within a certain range, and there should be a slight damage drop off for each bounce. So they should up, you know, the total damage by a bit, and then each bounce should maybe decrease the damage by 5%, but it has unlimited bounces to anything within range. That would give it more of like a cleave effect, like frozen orb, man. You can hit, like if you have 100 enemies together, they're all going to get fucking destroyed by one frozen orb, right? Same with something like incinerate. I think fireball's a little on the weekend where it has a pretty small explosion radius, and you know, I think that's probably part of the design behind, you know, this Super Mario setup is to turn fireball into more of a cleave spell. But you know, ice shards somewhere in the middle where it pierces. But with, you know, you consider the upgrade of ice shards where they ricochet off of frozen enemies, that really makes ice shards do much more than just pass through 5, right? They're kind of ricocheting all over the place, and it turns this spell also into very good group cleave. And so I really feel like the lightning ones could use some love to where they actually affect more enemies versus just being, you know, sort of like linear spells. So while we're on chain lightning, let's cover the other aspects that influence it. So recharging aspect is also getting changed. So it's going to become each time chain lightning bounces, you gain 2 to 3 mana, and it used to be 4 to 6 mana when bouncing off of you. So the mana's halved, but it's going to count on all bounces, right? And then one of the other really cool changes actually is to Veer's Mastery. And so this is basically for, you know, melee lightning builds, which seem to be kind of one of the things they're focusing on with these changes to give them a little bit of love. And they're changing this damage bonus increase from 10 to 15% multiplier. And so a 5% boost. And then that's actually going to pair pretty nicely with the new legendary aspect they're adding called Mage Lord's aspect. And that's going to be basically one specific to Veer's Mastery. And it's going to make Veer's Mastery key passive's damage reduction is increased by 20 to 30% for each close enemy, up to 60 to 90%. Now, important note here, the way these are worded, this isn't going to be an additive increase where you're going to be over 100% damage reduction when close to more than 3 enemies. It simply means the values that are already there will be increased by 60 to 90%. So with the buff in this patch at the top end, it's going to be, you know, this 20% increased by 90%. And so, you know, 10% of 20% is 2%. You just move the decimal over 1. And so if we subtract that from 20, that's 18%. And so we can add that. And so, you know, we can find out that a 90% increase to that, if we have 3 or more enemies around us, is going to give us a 38% total damage reduction. And if you consider when you crit, it going up by another 25%, that's also usually works in the same way, where it would be, you know, 10% is 2%. And so 25% would be 10%, so 4% plus a half of 2%, so it would be 5%, right? And so we would have the 38 plus 5% when we crit, giving us 43% total damage reduction with these new buffs from Veer's Mastery. So, you know, I just want to make sure, sometimes like when they say different percentages, it can be a bit confusing. It's not going to give you, you know, 90% damage reduction. It's going to be a 90% increase of the numbers that are already here. I hope that makes sense. Okay, other cool aspect changes to lightning are they are changing gravitational aspect to where ball lightning orbits around you and actually deals 15 to 25% increased damage instead of the current damage reduction it has on it. I think this is good, but I think ball lightning in itself really needs a boost to the base weapon damage. I think compared to some of these other mastery skills, it's just, at least in my experience, it might be different for some people, but it seems to do quite low amount of damage. You know, when you compare it to something like Meteor or like Blizzard with ice spikes, you know, or even Firewall. So yeah, I think it, you know, again, step in the right direction, but probably will need a little more love in the end. And then last changes to the aspects that are sort of for everything, but kind of in the lightning category are charged aspect, which is the bonus move speed you got from grabbing crackling energy is going, the duration of that's going to be doubled from 4 to 8 seconds. And then aspect of the bounded conduit, which is the one that gives you move speed after teleporting, is just going to be increased by 5%. So 20 to 25% increase to 25 to 30%. So just an additional 5% move speed after teleporting. And then for the Paragon board changes specific to lightning, there's 3 changes. So the Ceaseless Conduit legendary node. Let's take a look here. They increase crackling energy's damage from 2 to 3% per 20 intelligence the player has. So this little 2% X multiplier is going to be a 3% X. So just a little nice little damage buff to especially late game crackling energy builds when you have your intelligence, you know, really maxed out. And then they made some max life bonus changes to the lightning resilience rare node. And both of these are on the static surge board. And so again, a little more love to melee lightning builds, right? And so this lightning resilience one, see this max life as the secondary attribute. That's going to be bonus, or that's going to be increased from 4 to 6%. And then the other one on the other side of the board, restorative, is also going to have its bonus increased from 4 to 6%. And, you know, the way you want to think about this is that's basically half of a fully scaled ruby, right? And so if you run both those together, it's basically going to give you 1 more ruby in your gear. And so does it help? Yeah. Is it a game changer? No, not really. But, you know, all this stuff adds up. And so we're definitely not, we definitely want everything we can get, right? And so we will take it. All right, so that's it for lightning. Now moving on to fire, which also has some pretty good changes, also headed in the right direction, I think. Starting with fireball upgrades, similar to the way they upgraded the chain lightning upgrades. And so this enhanced fireball is going to be changed to casting fireball increases its radius by 50%, not the distance traveled. And so basically what this means is if you're using fireball as a spell to cast, it's going to increase the damage. It's not going to increase the damage if you have it enchanted. And on my stream the other day, we actually ran an experiment to test if enchanted effects counted as being casted. And we did that by using this staff I have that has a 100% chance to spawn an additional lightning spear when you cast it, right? And so what I did is I enchanted lightning spear. And see how it says absorbing crackling energy has a 10% chance to conjure a lightning spear. The test was if I'm wearing that staff, if I run over a crackling energy and get a lightning spear spawn, I should get 2 spawns if it counts as being casted, if the enchantment counts as being casted, right? And it didn't. And so what that basically tells me is when you see this verbiage, when you cast it, it means you actually have to cast it. It doesn't count for enchantments. And that's basically, I think, the change they're implementing here with Fireball is essentially that it's not going to apply to the enchantment. It's going to apply to when you actually use the ability on your hotbar. And then the other change is to Destructive Fireball. And so they're changing it to Fireball's critical strike damage is increased by 20%. This bonus is increased to 30% if Fireball hits 3 or more enemies. Rather than the way it is right now, where the floor is 10% and each enemy it hits gives you an extra 5%, up to 25% total. So basically what they're doing is they're raising the floor by 10% and then they're raising the cap by 5%. And it's going to, you're basically going to be able to jump from 20 to 30% if you hit 3 or more enemies. And so it'll be a little more binary, but in general, a buff to damage. Another really cool change they're making that I'm really excited about because I'm currently running it in this Lightning Meteor build I'm messing around with is this Essu's Ferocity. And this is actually a super cool passive that when you're running it with the aspect, not only gives you both these bonuses together, but gives you a massive amount of attack speed. You can see I'm running it on my amulet. And so when I proc that shit, which is just killing something with a crit, so it happens all the time when I'm playing alone, I get a 72% attack speed increase, just absolutely nuts. And then I stack that with my lightning alt and this extra basic attack speed on my helmet, and I'm just going off like a fucking cannon. What they're doing to change this is they're making it so the bonuses are granted when you critical strike a boss. So the problem with it right now is when you're fighting a boss, it's basically never active unless you get mobs, coming in as part of the boss encounter that you can kill real quick, and then you have it for 3 seconds against the boss until those mobs are gone. So just like here's an example of the attack speed you can get with Essus, right? It's pretty rad in general. So this will just help out builds running Essus against bosses, which is cool. And then the last change to skills or passives is combustion. And so they're changing it to your burning effects deal 20% increased damage plus an additional 2% increased damage per unique source of burning you have applied to the enemy. And so basically, from this verbiage, the way I interpret it is they're adding a 20% floor multiplier to this, right? So it starts at 20% instead of starting at 0%. And they're removing this extra effect in the last sentence where it says, if the enemy is burning from 3 or more sources, this bonus is doubled, because that wording was not included in the tooltip that they showed in the slides. And so basically they're adding a 20% floor, and then it's going to work the same way, and they're removing this doubling when burning from 3 or more sources, it looks like. And so I think that will be a buff in the end for burn builds, because you would basically need it to be burning from 5 extra sources of damage, and then have that be doubled to equal the 20% floor. So I think it is definitely a buff in the end, and you probably will feel it quite a bit if you're running a burn build. And I think this stacked with the Wrathful Heart may actually give burn builds in our case some viability in this season. So I will definitely be playing around with a burn build at some point, probably a bit later in the season, to really see if how viable that is, especially with these combustion changes. Okay, taking a look at some of the legendaries, one of the main ones they mentioned is the Serpentine aspect, and so this is the one that lets you have an additional Hydra, and they're actually changing this to be similar to the gravitational one with Ball Lightning. They're changing it from damage reduction to damage increase, and so Hydra's duration is now going to be increased by 14 to 24% instead of reduced by 20 to 10% like shown here. And this will now also affect Hydra's enchantment effect, and I think this one's pretty cool. And then some other ones are Aspect of Conflagration, which is active while you're channeling Incinerate, is basically going to increase the bonus burning damage from 20 to 30% to 20 to 40%, so just 10% increase on the ceiling. Aspect of Engulfing Flames, which is only in effect while enemies are affected by more dot damage than their total life, so kind of a specific use case to very burn-focused builds. The bonus burning damage is increased from 30 to 40% up to 60 to 80%. And so significant boost there where both of those, the low end and the top end, are doubled. And so I haven't, gone all in on a burn build, so I can't really tell you how impactful these changes will be, but they're higher numbers, so they should help either way, right? And then Aspect of 3 Curses, I think this is actually a really cool one, and this is just going to make it so the increase to critical strike damage of Meteor and Fireball is now on all the time and then boosted against healthy targets. Whereas right now, the aspect is you get 35 to 50% bonus damage against healthy targets. And so it's changing to be increase the critical strike damage of Meteor and Fireball by 20 to 40%, double this bonus against healthy enemies. And so it'll be on all the time. And then against healthy enemies, it will be 40 to 80%, right? So that's actually going to be a really awesome aspect if you're running something with Meteor or Fireball like I am. And so I will be testing that out after these changes on stream with my gigantic Meteor, and definitely going to help my damage, I can only imagine. So I think that's a good one. And then a couple utility changes. They're changing Flamewalker's aspect where you use Flame Shield to move through enemies. They're changing the bonus move speed from 4 to 6 seconds, so just a little 2-second buff on the move speed there. And then Incendiary Aspect, which used to only apply to burn damage, is now changed to damage, a lucky hit effect, damage from your pyromancy skills have up to a 12 to 17% chance to restore 10 mana rather than just from burn damage. And so that'll open it up to be utilized by more fire heavy builds that aren't just focused on burn, things like, Fireball and Meteor. And so finally for fire, changes to the Paragon board. So what they've done is they changed the Searing Heat legendary node. And so right now it's going to give you increased crit strike chance when casting Fireball or Meteor, and it's going to stack for that specific skill. And the change is going to be to make it so casting Fireball or Meteor increases your critical strike chance by 5% for 5 seconds, up to 15%, and that applies to all skills. So it's just critical strike chance in general versus critical strike chance with that specific skill. So just an all-around buff there. And then the Keeper of Flames rare node on the Searing Heat board is going to get a damage reduction increase. And so this damage reduction is going to go from 4 to 5%. And this additional bonus, once you hit these requirements, is also going to go from 4 to 5%. And so you will see a 2% damage reduction buff to this node if you have the bonus online. And so, not huge, but like we will take it. We'll definitely take it. And then similar thing on the Burning Instinct board, the Smoldering Embers rare node that gives you damage reduction will be buffed in a similar way, where the top will be boosted from 4 to 5% and the bonus will be increased from 4 to 5%. So you will get another 2% bonus out of this node as well. All right, so our final element, Frost, is the one that saw the least changes, probably because it's sort of objectively the strongest right now. And a big part of that is because of how powerful the core skills are compared to the other core skills. And that's part of what I was mentioning earlier, where, in my opinion, Ice Shards and Frozen Orb are kind of on a whole other level than all 4 of these other ones. In their damage, they both slow and, they both chill into freeze. So there's built-in crowd control. They both have built-in vulnerability, and they both have huge just group cleave. And so all those things, kind of just make them objectively better than these other ones. And so, I think that's why some of these other ones are starting to see some love. I do think they're going to need a little more love before they're on the same level as how powerful these Frost ones are. So of the changes that did get made to Frost, there was no mention of any skills or passives that got changed. Some of the legendary aspects that got changed were Aspect of Frozen Orbit. The damage is increasing from 20 to 30% up to 30 to 40%. So just a 10% buff there on the extra explosion you get from your orb. That's cool. Snow Veiled Aspect, the unstoppable duration is being increased from 2 to 3 seconds to 3 to 5 seconds. And they're adding additional functionality where you'll get 10% bonus armor for the same amount of time, 3 to 5 seconds. And so that's the one where Ice Armor gives you unstoppable. So they're basically increasing the window by a little bit and also giving you a little bit of bonus armor while it's active. And then Snow Guard's aspect, this one's actually pretty cool. They changed it. Right now, it's the one that gives you the damage reduction while in Blizzard. And it's basically the same, except they change it so that you also get this bonus for 2 seconds after leaving your Blizzard. And so this will let you, instead of having to stand in your Blizzard for the damage reduction, you can kind of kite around and move between Blizzards, right? And you'll still have that damage reduction up for the 2 seconds you're moving between one Blizzard and another. And so I think that's a cool change and will definitely help, with survivability in builds that are using Blizzard. And then these last 2 legendary changes are kind of for all builds, like some of them, but they often apply to Frost builds. So Storm Swell Aspect, the bonus damage is increased from 11 to 20% to 21 to 30%. And this is the one that gives you the bonus damage when you have a barrier. And then Aspect of Concentration, which is that mana regeneration increase when you don't get hit, had the mana regen increased from 20 to 30% up to 40 to 50%. So significant boost there, 20% on both sides of the window. And the duration requirement to gain its benefit was reduced from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. So it'll come into effect 1 second sooner, and you're going to be getting 20% more mana regeneration regardless of where your role is in the window. And so I think that's actually, a really sick buff to that one, where I will definitely end up trying it now with some builds, as it seems much more worth it than it did before. And then finally, the Paragon changes with regards to Frost are just going to be 2 changes, one on the Frigid Fate board, actually both on the Frigid Fate board. And so the first one, they're going to be similar to the damage reduction on the fire boards, where this guarded node is going to get a 1% damage reduction increase, and also the bonus will get 1%. So if you have the bonus online, this will be a 2% damage reduction increase for this node here. And then I think the best one is the oppressive rare node, which you can see I'm making my way over to right now. And this is one that a lot of us end up scooping anyways in a lot of our builds because of the vulnerable damage on it. And the damage reduction we get is actually the secondary stat. And so this one is just going to see a 1% increase because we don't have it as the bonus. We have the vulnerable damage as the bonus, but we're getting this node anyways a lot of times. So this is just going to be an extra, 1% damage reduction for a lot of builds just anyways, right? Because we're building vuln a lot of time anyways. Boom. I think that's pretty much it. So I hope that was useful. I hope it made sense. I tried to basically, lay it out in Sorcerer format so we can all sort of internalize it and digest it better. If you have any questions, please drop those in the comments. I do my best to take a look at all those. And so if I don't answer it immediately, I will definitely get to it at some point. And then if you want to ask me sooner, I'm actually trying to live stream most days on this guy, my new Sorcerer for Season 1, testing out one of my new build ideas, and we'll be testing a bunch of different build ideas as I move closer into endgame once I finish the video for this, sort of lightning meteor build I'm working on right now. And so if you want to stop by with any questions, say what's up, just hang out, theorycraft anything with me. I would love to have you over there. So that's Zikaric on Twitch with a 0. And yeah, besides that, hope it was useful. Take care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.